Okay, thank you. So also, thank you, Dr. Monica, for the invitation. So I'm Joshua from Hong Kong. So today my presentation is about the personhood in both two thinkers, Edith-Stein and Karol Wojtyła, also known as Saint Pope John Paul II. So it's on the topic, the concept of self-giving and the essence of the human person. So go to point one that you can see. It's like when I read the end of the book of finite and eternal being, Weinstein finished her book with a session of Christ and humanity. I feel strange in this ending. When you go to read it, this final part, I feel so strange. I was wondering if there is a connection between individual being and divine being. So my hypothesis is that the image of God could be the fullness of being a human person, through which Stein wanted to explain the telos of being a human person. So this is the hypothesis of the question. And the guiding question today is coming here is, in Stein personalism, how the act of self-giving mixed or become the elements, key elements of the dynamic process by which the human person unfolds and actualizes his individual essence. So you see there's three elements, key elements here. First, individual essence. Second, the understanding of the human person. The last, self-giving. So the coming 30 minutes will be divided into three parts. The following. So first part is Stein's critique on individuation. Second part would be the understanding of personhood of Karol Wojtyła. The third part would be synthesis, put them all and see what's the connection between the image of God and Stein's understanding of personhood. So let's start. So point two, what does it mean by being an individual? So we can distinguish a man from our because of the form of them. Humanity is the form of a man. It's essential. It's universal. Shareable for all human beings. Aquinas, following Aristotelian tradition, attribute individuation to materia signata quantitas, matter designated by quantity. Formed matter makes and recognize things as individual, enabling us to distinguish from this man from that man. So matter also become the reason for the being individual. So you see the picture down here is called the Terracotta Army. That is the sculptures in the tomb of the Emperor Qin. So the point is like to protect him, the warrior will protect him in the afterlife. So, but you can see the statues. How can you distinguish one statue and another statue or sculptures? Maybe the color, the shapes is different. Then you can distinguish. But do we distinguish a man simply by this? Okay. Yes or no? Yeah. Okay. So, okay. Not only, right? So Stein argued that this make individuality a mere accident. The uniqueness of, for example, Socrates will be just random, dependent on matter, rather than grounded in his personhood. So Stein was unsatisfied with this account because for her, the process of individuation of a human being is not piling different attributes or accumulating material changes. So in Stein's personalism, she wants to distinguish the essence as the being what from the what. So we come to this 2.2. So there's a three ideas here. So we look at 1 and 3 first, then we go back to the second. So the what refers to the pure form considered in abstraction, It is the universal, intelligible structure, the meaning that can be instantiated in multiple individuals. What is Socrates? A man. Humanity is the what of Socrates. So the question is not who is Socrates? What is Socrates? So by being what? So to Stein's favorite examples of joy. So joy, you have a definition, but being I am joyful could be different from Juan Carlos, you say, I am joyful. So being what? It is to transform the what, come to existence, come to exist. So the second concept, it is important. So there's a typo. So the form of the essence. I think just now, Professor Ruta also used this in German is the Wesen form. But in new translation, Redmond translation, he doesn't just use form or essential form. He used the form of essence. Why is that? Between the form and being form, Stein in chapter 4 introduced this concept, form of the essence, in order to account for essence as the unfolding of the meaning of the what. To unfold is to transform the what to an existence. So, for example, being a human person is to unfold the meaning of a human person in an individual being. So before being an individual man, one needs an inner structural ordering. So the form of the essence is the inner form. For it gives the what, the structural potential to be unfolded in individual, differentiating this man from that man. So the reason form prescribes and contains the essential potentiality. It's essential. It's not simply accidental. So for Stein, the soul is the reason form that made us becomes different, becomes an individual. So the soul form the body and at the same time shape the spiritual life of the person. So we have different depth of spiritual life of each single person. So what makes Socrates? What determines Joshua? Is three of them. What? The form of the essence, and then being what? They together construct and make the configuration of a unique being unfolded in an individual. So this allows Stein to say, being Socrates means that everyone he is and how he is of this man, along with all he's doing and undergoing, in short, all that belongs to his being has grown from a single root. So Socrates is not a static, a given fact, being Socrates, but a dynamism in which the individual, the Socrates, chooses to become. I choose to become me, this man, this Joshua. This dynamism is not an accidental process for Stein. So Stein disagrees with this change in humanity, in human individuality as passive, but she conceived that the form of the essence enable each person to be an irreducible way of unfolding his individual essence. Irreducible way to unfold each single individual essence. So, but the question comes again. Point 3. What is the telos? What's the goal of this actualization? What's the goal of this unfolding? Could we just, in our life, just simply unfold, be ourselves? Is there a goal? So I'm thinking of this. So I turn to Karol Wojtyła to seek if there's an answer. So point 4. So we come to Karol Wojtyła's personalist philosophy. The first point we're going to see his understanding of the irreducible subjectivity. So it comes to 1.1, this famous personalist norm that Wojtyła adopted. It's called persona as sui juris et alderi incommunicabilis in Latin. So the first part of this sentence, sui juris, means the person is his own, because in the lived experience, he is always the subject of his act. He consents, he wills, he recognizes the authorship of what he does. He is both the managing subject and simultaneously the managed object of his action. This shows the capability of self-governing and self-possession. So second, the second part of this Latin phrase is meaning that incommunicable to another. Why? Because such an experience of self-possession is unique to the person himself. No one can will my will and possess myself as I do. This also indicates that the I that the person experiences as a subject in the lived experience cannot be the I of you. It is an unrepeatable and impenetrable self. The key is that we are the subject who manage the object. At the same time, that is the subject itself. I manage myself. The lived experience of oneself is irreducible, but does not absolutize the role of subjectivity. That means it is not simply subjectivistic view for Karol Wojtyła. So how? So we come to 1.2. So Wojtyła adopted the principle, another Latin principle, operari esse. It should be, so there's a typo as well. It should be operari sequitur esses. So to do follows to be. But he turned it into an expression of esse revealed in operari. So that means to be a human, to be a human person for Wojtyła is revealed in his action as a whole person, as a whole phenomenon. A man can know himself within himself from his lived experience of himself. That is his interiority, in which his act and existence are reflected upon his consciousness. So then now come to his phenomenological elements. Wojtyła's phenomenological methods emerge in the relationship between person and act. So in Polish, czyn, czyn, czyn in Polish means act semantically and exclusively attends to human conscious action together with the metaphysical concept of potency and act. By distinguishing the awareness of happening, just happening in the subject from the action that done by the person who is the agent of the act, Wojtyła argued that each human act mirrors the person's back to himself. So he say the act is a particular moment of the vision of the person. Human act, czyn, and existence are connected. So for Wojtyła, one discovers oneself not through abstract reflection. I think, therefore I am. No, not in this way. But through lived experience of the conscious action, it is the lived experience of the phenomenon of I act that makes the irreducible nature of the human person to be balanced between human subjectivity and the objectivity of a human person. The person as a subject presents and being aware of himself in the experience of his act. Thus, Wojtyła noted, the irreducible signifies that which is essentially incapable of reduction, that which cannot be reduced, but can only be disclosed and revealed. So if come to this, point 3, fullness in donum and communal. By first analyzing the phenomenon of I act, Wojtyła demonstrated the awareness of the trained phenomena of I act, I possess, and I give. Why? Why I give? Serve as the substrate for understanding oneself as a person within interpersonal relationship, communal personalum. Because the person possesses himself, he's capable of self-determination and ultimately being a self-gift, acting with and for others in a way that reveals his deepest identities. But the paradox emerges. Why? By giving, we can receive or discover more about ourselves. So when you see this quote, one of the most essential quotes to understand Wojtyła is this one from Gaudium et Spes, the document from the Vatican II. The Lord Jesus, who prayed to the Father that all may be one as we are one, opened up vistas closed to human reason. Jesus, implied a certain likeness between the union of the divine person and the unity of God's sons in the truth, in truth and charity. This likeness reveals that man, who is the only creature on earth which God willed for itself, cannot fully find himself except through a sincere gift of himself. You cannot fully find yourself except through being a sincere gift of himself. Now, what's interesting, I'm not going to expand this part. The Polish translation of sincere gift is deeper. It have a meaning of selfless. So if someone wants to ask about it, they can talk about it. So Wojtyła's role, many have debated Wojtyła's role in writing this text. But what is important is that this is the heart of his Christian philosophical anthropology. The person discovered the fullness of himself only through being gift to others in likeness to the communion of the divine person who are one in love. So the key is that being a self-gift to other as an act reveals the image and likeness of God. That is the image of a Trinitarian God. 3 persons in one being, not just one isolation. So come to the 4th point, the image of likeness of God is very important to understand self-gift and communal. So in this union, rooted in Trinitarian theology, the Son, who has taken humanity in existence, voluntarily empty it in order to partake in a boundaryless union with the Father, showing that the fullness of humanity that's created out of the image and likeness of God is founded not in itself, but in a self-giving and receiving relationship. Being with others is not something added to the nature of the human as just social activity. No, but is rather an intrinsic part of the nature divided from his being made in the likeness and image and the interpersonal relationship of the Trinity. Being an individual and a gift for others are the nature inscribed within the human person, reflecting the image of God out of which God created us. Thus, you can see why Wojtyła later used the image of spousal love to reflect on this idea. It's like giving and receiving. So, for Wojtyła, human fullness, it is not something static. It is not just from potential, from potency, from potential to become actualization, but in the reality. In the reality. So now, point 5. So given that Wojtyła and Stein share a similar way in their philosophical foundation, then I tried to argue that the account of the fullness of the personhood by Wojtyła might give a hint to answer the telos of being a human person for Stein. So to come to the most important part of this section. So first, irreducibility and incommunicability. So both Stein and Wojtyła has talked about it. Irreducible. So not going to talk about too much at this point. But the second point, the image and the likeness of God. So in this part, Stein already discussed the image of God in chapter 4, Infinite Eternal Being, linked closely to interiority. That's where she quotes Teresa Avila a lot in this part. He used the word Bild, the term of image in German. She used it also for formation, building of the person related to the inner depth of the soul, where describe the archetype of the image of humanity, Stein used Urbild. In this final session of her book, Stein referred to the individual essence of the soul to the bearer of the stamp, the image of God. That is also the likeness of God. In German, Gottenbildlichkeit. So when you go back to what was that? Oh, 5 minutes. Okay. So that's why. So if you go to a Christological understanding, so Jesus Christ is not the image, but God Himself. So He's not an image. He is the antitype, the type before type. He is the seal of the type, the stamp. So the antitype is the Trinity, who is communal and three-person in one being. So the philosophical implications. The image of God is therefore not individualistic. It reflects the Trinitarian structure, unity in plurality. Hence, a human person cannot find fullness in isolation if the divine image has already inscribed it in us. A human person is inherently relational and communal in union. Stein employed the doctrine of the image of God not only for communal life, but also to explain why self-enclosure blocks personal fullness. The form of the essence is not a static blueprint. The soul is not a static blueprint for human being, but there's a depth of the soul. That's why interior castle, this idea, can fully fit in. So we come to point 7. Stein continued to talk about self-giving. So, and there's a quote, and she said, the divine being a person is the archetype of all finite being a person. The we, das wir, is the form wherein we experience the being one as a plurality of person. Being one is not opposed to the multiplicity and diversity of the person, because love is giving oneself away over and hingabe to a thou. And when completed, because the self-giving is mutual and being one. So the entire idea that I can get from Wojtyła is like, from Wojtyła is that you have self-possession. Stein, yes, you understand yourself. But Wojtyła gives a self-gift to fulfill the fullness, the image of God. And why Stein finished her book in that session, Christ and Humanity and Image of God? Because she also might have the same idea that the image of God, that the soul has imprint, we are called to being the image of God in every single individual, even though salvation is universal. But every single person achieve your salvation in your own way. So that means self-giving is an act that can reveal the image of God and also reveals the human fullness toward that the restoration. That's the Eastern Orthodox term, restoration of the image of God. our image of God has been ruined, damaged by sin. So we restore it in our individual way. So that's why from individual being to divine being, there's a connection. It's because everyone will have the image of God in us, and we need to be in the image of God in our life. So the end of this presentation is at the end. This is part of my this discussion, part of my PhD discussion. So I use Carmelite spirituality to fully support this giving, empty, receive, fullness dimension that John of the Cross has perfectly, beautifully, poetic, like a poemly to demonstrate what that is. So thank you so much.